In today's Federal Flash, a flurry of activity across multiple federal agencies. First, we cover the USDA's 11th hour reversal to extend waivers that have made it easier for school districts to serve free school meals, plus FEMA's new guidance that ends state reimbursement for cloth, face masks, and PPE for schools. We also have all the details on Secretary DeVos's letter to chief state school officers about spring 2021 assessments. Hi, I'm Ann Heislip, and I'm joined by Lindsay Dworkin. Let's begin with the U.S. Department of Agriculture's surprise move last week to extend flexibilities for schools to continue operating their summer meal programs. Lindsay?
In a last-minute decision, the U.S. Department of Agriculture reversed its previous position and extended waivers that allow school districts to more easily serve free meals to students during the pandemic. Specifically, the waivers enable schools to operate their meal programs during the school year as they do over the summer, and provide free meals without burdening families with paperwork to verify eligibility. The waivers, which were set to expire this month, have been extended through December 31st. As we discussed on our last Federal Flash, Agricultural Secretary Sonny Perdue intended to let the waivers expire, reasoning that the agency lacked authority to implement any extension. But pressure from school administrators, education and school nutrition advocates, and members of Congress, including Republicans, seems to have persuaded him to change course. House Education Committee Chairman Bobby Scott applauded the USDA's decision, but called it a, quote, temporary solution, urging the department to extend the waivers for the entire 2020-21 school year. Perdue, however, is contending that there isn't sufficient funding to do so, which could make school nutrition a top priority as Congress returns to negotiations on another coronavirus relief package.
Starting September 15th, cash-strapped states must pay for the cost of cloth, face coverings, and other personal protective equipment for schools. Expenses states were previously reimbursed for by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Under FEMA's new guidance, cloth face masks and PPE in non-emergency settings will be classified as increased operating costs for public services and will not be covered by FEMA's Public Assistance Program. Governors and mayors, chief state school officers, district and school leaders, and teachers unions had all urged FEMA to continue reimbursement for PPE in schools. Instead, the government is offering schools assistance for PPE through other agencies. A Department of Health and Human Services program, for example, will distribute up to 125 million cloth face masks to schools, with an emphasis on high-need students and on schools providing in-person instruction. But it is unclear if these measures will fully meet schools' needs or enable them to comply with CDC guidelines for reopening. FEMA's decision comes less than 2 weeks after the Trump administration guidance that deemed teachers and other school staff critical infrastructure workers as part of the president's continued push for schools to resume in-person instruction this fall. Though that guidance is non-binding, it has prompted some states and districts to enact policies to declare teachers essential workers, meaning that they'll be expected to continue to go to work even if they've been exposed to COVID-19.
For the second time in a month, a federal judge has ruled against Secretary DeVos's rule on providing equitable services to private school students under the CARES Act. The rule encourages districts to set aside CARES dollars for private school students not as they do under Title I, but based on the total number of students in private schools, regardless of income. U.S. District Judge James Donato for the Northern District of California granted a preliminary injunction blocking the Education Department from enforcing the rule in 7 states and Washington, D.C., and in school districts in Chicago, Cleveland, New York City, and San Francisco, while he hears arguments in the case, calling the department's logic, quote, interpretive jiggery-pokery in the extreme. Judge Donato joins a U.S. District Judge in Washington State in denouncing the rule, though there are lingering questions whether the prior injunction applies nationwide or only in Washington State. We'll continue following these cases as they move through the court.
Finally, last week, Secretary DeVos sent a letter to chief state school officers following several requests for waivers from essay testing requirements in the upcoming school year. As a reminder, the Education Department, reiterated by provisions in the CARES Act, allowed all states to suspend their assessments last spring and pause their school accountability systems. The Secretary's letter, however, makes it clear that this is not the plan for the year ahead. Secretary DeVos highlights how assessments are vital tools to support students and provide transparency to parents about their child's learning and the schools in their communities. Tools that will be more critical than ever given unprecedented disruptions to schooling from COVID-19, especially for historically underserved students. DeVos also cites a bipartisan letter from All4Ed and other groups, stating that, quote, "The challenges posed by this crisis only underscore the value of collecting and reporting on a standard measure of student performance. Leaders should not have to continue to steer recovery efforts in the dark." While DeVos's letter makes clear that states should not expect another round of waivers from ESSA's testing requirements, the department is willing to be flexible and work with states to rethink their assessment systems, and in particular, reconsider how or whether assessment results from spring 2021 are used for accountability purposes. That's all for today. For an alert when the next Federal Flash is available, email alliance@all4ed.org. Thanks for watching.
Federal Flash is the Alliance for Excellent Education's video series on important developments in education policy in Washington, D.C. Watch online at all4ed.org/federalflash, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or listen to Federal Flash wherever you get your podcasts.